Bedrock Linux is one of the most fascinating and misunderstood projects in the entire open source world, and today we're going to dive deep into what it really is, how it works, why people call it the super system of Linux, and whether it actually lives up to the hype or is just too complicated for normal users. In a world full of distros that promise freedom, customization, stability, or simplicity, Bedrock Linux tries to do something no other distro even attempts. It tries to combine the best parts of every Linux distribution into one unified operating system. That's not marketing hype. That's literally its purpose. And the way it does it is unlike anything you've ever seen. To understand Bedrock Linux, you first have to understand the frustration that led to its creation. Linux users often find themselves stuck choosing between distros, and every distro comes with strengths, but also trade-offs. Maybe you love the stability of Debian, but the packages are too old for your workflow. Maybe you love Arc's bleeding-edge software, but you don't want to deal with its occasional breakage. Maybe you want the enterprise reliability of CentOS, but you also want access to Fedora's newer packages or voids run it in its system. These choices shape your entire computing environment, and for years the Linux community has accepted them as unavoidable limitations. Bedrock Linux was invented to eliminate the idea of having to choose. The creator of Bedrock Linux, Paradigm, set out with a simple but insanely ambitious idea. What if instead of switching distros to get their advantages, you could actually run all distros at the same time on one machine? What if you could use Debian's stable libraries, Arc's rolling updates, Fedora's cutting-edge features, and Alpine's lightweight footprint simultaneously, all in one unified system, without dual booting, without virtual machines, and without container headaches? It sounds like science fiction, but it's real, and it works. Bedrock Linux achieves this using what it calls strata. A stratum is basically a layer taken from another Linux distro. Think of it like this. Imagine your OS is built from Lego bricks, and every distro is a different box of Legos. Bedrock lets you take pieces from each box to build the perfect system for yourself. You could have a base file system from one distro, the package manager from another, system utilities from a third, and graphical apps from a fourth. These strata coexist seamlessly, and from the user's perspective, it feels like everything is installed on one system. There's no switching sessions, no crooting manually, no VM windows. Everything runs natively side by side. That's why people call it the super system, because it literally combines distros into a hybrid environment that should, in theory, give you everything and make you sacrifice nothing. But how does it actually do this? Bedrock Linux internally handles namespaces and special file system merges so that each stratum believes it's running in its own environment. Then the system unifies binaries, libraries, and configurations where needed, allowing programs from different distros to communicate with each other. You could install Firefox from Arch, use Mesa drivers from Fedora, launch a Debian-based tool for stability, and manage your services using Runit or System depending on which stratum they came from. It's a level of flexibility that feels almost illegal. The cool part is that Bedrock Linux doesn't try to replace the distros, it just lets them cooperate. You want apt? You can have it. You want Pacman? It works to .dnf. Sure, why not? Apt from Alpine? Yep, that too. You can literally have 4 or 5 package managers installed on your machine without conflict because each one is operating in its own stratum, but contributing software to the unified system. There is nothing else like this in the Linux world. The power this unlocks is unbelievable. Imagine installing Arc's latest GNOME desktop environment, but using Debian's extremely stable core libraries and kernel modules. Or imagine pulling in the EUR for its massive software library while relying on Void Linux's lightning-fast init system. Developers can use the bleeding-edge toolchains from Fedora while keeping the long-term stability of CentOS. Security-focused users can run hardened packages from Alpine while still enjoying the polish of Ubuntu's desktop ecosystem. Bedrock Linux lets you combine them all. And the best part is, everything you install becomes available to the system globally, regardless of which distro it came from. You could open a terminal and type a command installed by Arch, then open another tool that's from Debian, then launch a GUI app from Void, and they will all run inside the same graphical session as if they were native. It feels like creating your own mega distribution that cherry-picks the absolute best parts of every Linux ecosystem. But before you run off and install Bedrock Linux, there's something you need to know. Bedrock is extremely powerful, but it is not designed for beginners at all. Installing it isn't like installing Ubuntu or Mint, where you click next a few times. Bedrock installs by converting your existing Linux distribution into a Bedrock system by reconstructing the file system layout and inserting its own management layer. This is not a casual operating system. It is a meta distribution that expects you to know what you're doing. When something breaks, and it absolutely will at some point, you need to understand how different systems interact. For example, mixing libraries from different distros can create conflicts you need to debug manually. Package managers may try to overwrite each other's files if not isolated correctly. Init systems from different strata can interfere if the user isn't careful. And documentation for Bedrock exists, but it's nowhere near the polished guides you'd find for Arch, Ubuntu, or Fedora. Despite that, the people who use Bedrock Linux love it with almost cult-like passion, and it's easy to see why. For advanced Linux power users, Bedrock solves the biggest pain point of Linux, the need to compromise. With normal distros, you have to choose. Do you want stability or cutting edge? Do you want performance or compatibility? Do you want systemed or run it? Do you want access to the AUR or the reliability of Debian stable? Bedrock says, why not have all of them? To fully understand why Bedrock Linux is so unique, it's helpful to compare it to alternatives. For example, some people use containers like Docker or LXC to run multiple environments, but those tools isolate applications by default, and they're not designed to unify them into one environment. Others use Crute or System Spawn to run sub-environments, but they're clunky and don't fully integrate. Bedrock Linux is built from the ground up to merge ecosystems, not isolate them. Nixos and Gix offer reproducible builds and functional package management, which are powerful in a different way, but they don't let you mix distros. Ubuntu and Fedora provide stability and convenience, but lock you into their ecosystem. Arch and Gen to give you full control, but still force you to stay within their own package worlds. Bedrock Linux is the only distro where this program is only available. And that distro stops being a limitation. Imagine waking up and deciding you want to use Arc's latest Plasma desktop. So you install it in a stratum. But later, you want Ubuntu's stable version of OBS Studio because you're streaming that night. No problem, just install Ubuntu's stratum and grab it. Then maybe you need Fedora's newest GStreamer libraries for video editing. Add the Fedora stratum. Suddenly your system becomes this living, breathing hybrid organism that adapts to your needs. It's not one distro, it's all distros. And yet, Bedrock remains surprisingly lightweight. Because it isn't virtualizing distros or running containers, there's no performance overhead. Everything runs on the native kernel. Your GPU acceleration works normally. Your CPU resources aren't split into vMIS. Your storage isn't duplicated with multiple root file systems. The clever file system and namespace design lets everything coexist without constant overhead. That's one of the biggest reasons longtime Linux users call Bedrock a masterpiece of engineering. But Bedrock's strength is also its weakness. The freedom to mix ecosystems creates endless possibilities, and endless possibilities also mean endless room for chaos if you don't manage the system carefully. A package update in one stratum could break something in another. A rolling release stratum might push new libraries that a stable stratum wasn't prepared for. System-wide configurations like fonts, locales, theming, or system services can become complicated when they come from mixed sources. This is why Bedrock Linux is not recommended for people trying Linux for the first time, or even those with moderate experience. It is for users who already understand multiple distros and want the ultimate level of customization. Bedrock's philosophy is similar to Arc's Understand Your System, but far more extreme. It expects you not only to understand one distro, but several at once. If you're the kind of person who reads Arch wiki pages for fun, Bedrock might be the operating system you've been dreaming of. But the beauty of Bedrock Linux isn't just the tech, it's the mindset behind it. It challenges the long-standing idea in Linux that you must pick a side. For years, distros have formed their own tribes. Arch users argue with Ubuntu users. Fedora users debate with Debian enthusiasts. Gentoo veterans look down from the mountaintop. Every distro has a philosophy, almost like a culture. Bedrock doesn't choose a culture. It embraces them all, not by ignoring their differences, but by blending them into a system where each one contributes what it does best. It's basically the Linux equivalent of the Avengers. Every distro has a superpower. Debian is stability. Arch is freshness. Fedora is innovation. Alpine is minimalism. Void is simplicity. Gentoo is customization. Bedrock forms a team of these superpowers and lets them fight side by side instead of competing. And in doing so, it gives users an OS that feels more powerful than the sum of its parts. Imagine a scenario where you want the latest NVIDIA drivers from Fedora because they perform better on your gaming setup, but you also prefer Debian's reliable base system for work. You can combine them. Or maybe you want the EUR to install obscure packages, but you don't want to run Arch full-time. Just add an Arch stratum. Maybe you love Void Linux's Run It Service Manager, but also want Ubuntu Snap support. Bedrock makes it possible. The more you think about it, the more you realize just how revolutionary Bedrock Linux actually is. It breaks a rule we all assumed was unbreakable. That an operating system must be one unified distribution built by one community using one philosophy. Bedrock proves that an OS can be a modular collection of philosophies, a collaborative environment where diversity becomes strength instead of fragmentation. But is Bedrock the future of Linux? That's the big question. On one hand, it's such a brilliant idea that it feels like every power user should at least try it once. On the other hand, its complexity means it will never be mainstream. Most people want things to just work, and Bedrock is for people who like to build things, break things, and optimize things manually. It's a tool for tinkerers, developers, system architects, and people who aren't afraid to get into the guts of their operating system. However, Bedrock's influence might still become mainstream indirectly. Its philosophy of combining ecosystems instead of locking them down could inspire future distros. Already we see projects like DistroBox making it easier to run applications from other distros inside your main system. Flatpak and Appimagame to give distro-agnostic software delivery. Nix packages try to create universal reproducibility. The Linux world is slowly moving toward the idea that users shouldn't be constrained by distro limitations. But Bedrock Linux is still years ahead in this mindset. It's the only system that doesn't think, how can I make my distro better? Instead, it asks, why not just use all distros? And that question alone makes it one of the most innovative pieces of Linux engineering ever created. What's even more amazing is that Bedrock Linux is developed by a very small team. It doesn't have corporate backing, giant sponsors, or massive financial resources. It's a passion project built by people who genuinely love Linux and want to push it further. In a community that often focuses on stability, usability, and standardization, Bedrock is a rebel that breaks all the rules and somehow gets away with it. As more users discover it, Bedrock's reputation keeps growing. People who try it out often describe it as the distro I never knew I needed. They install Arch packages on Debian, mix Fedora system tools with Alpine libraries, or combine Void's minimalism with Ubuntu's ecosystem. And once they see how fluid and powerful it feels, many say they can never go back to traditional distros. It spoils you. It makes every other distro feel limited. Still, Bedrock isn't for everyone, and it doesn't try to be. It's not here to replace Ubuntu or Fedora or Arch. Those distros serve millions of users and have strengths Bedrock doesn't try to replicate. Bedrock's goal is much more specific: to give expert users the freedom to build the perfect hybrid system without compromise. It's an OS for people who want everything. So, is Bedrock Linux worth trying? If you're a beginner, absolutely not. Stick to Mint, Ubuntu, or popped_OS. If you're an intermediate user, maybe learn Arch or Fedora first. But if you're an advanced user who loves the idea of mixing distros and wants to build a machine that truly reflects your workflow, then Bedrock is one of the most exciting systems you can explore. Just be ready to get your hands dirty, learn a lot, and possibly deal with some challenges along the way. Ultimately, Bedrock Linux represents the spirit of Linux at its core: freedom. Not just the freedom to modify your system, but the freedom to merge ideas, to innovate outside the rules, and to build something that's truly yours. Instead of choosing a distro, Bedrock lets you create your own super system from the best parts of everything the Linux world has to offer. And that's what makes Bedrock so special. It isn't a normal OS. It's a playground. It's a toolkit. It's a meta distribution. It's a daring experiment. And most importantly, it's a reminder that Linux doesn't have to follow anyone's rules, not even its own. Bedrock Linux is the ultimate expression of that freedom. It's chaotic, brilliant, unconventional, and completely unique. And for the right user, it's one of the most powerful operating systems ever created.